The following program sponsored by Adams Financial Concepts.
About Money, a different approach to investing you won't hear anywhere else. Your host, Mike Adams, is a registered investment advisor and works with investment portfolios exceeding over $100,000 in net worth, and has a proven track record of managing long-term investments surpassing the markets in the long term. The information shared on the following program is for educational purposes only, and any investment advice given may not be suitable for all investors. And now, here's Mike.
It's Friday afternoon, and we're going to be talking about money. I had the opportunity this week to spend some time with Dr. Marvin Goodfriend. Dr. Goodfriend is a former senior vice president and advisor to the president of the Richmond Federal Reserve Bank. He is also an economist and an endowed chair at Carnegie Mellon University, where I graduated from. So I had a chance to sit down and talk to him. He's a brilliant person. He's a person who's forward-looking. He's been way ahead of what he's done in his research. And anyway, there's a lot to come. I want to talk about that, but that's going to come later in the program. You want to stick around, hear what I have to say, and there's things that I agree and disagree with. I'm going to talk about those later in the program. But I want to start with an event that happened this last week, or just finished earlier this week. The Climate Summit in Paris. You know, leaders of a number of nations took a break from talking about terrorists, from talking about overwhelming debt, from talking about stagnant economies, from all the issues that they have been faced with and talking about, and they began to focus on climate, a crisis which is probably going to be a crisis long after they leave office. Most will have left office a long time before we see the impact. You know, and what they're talking about, 2015 is very, very likely, we're almost to the end of the year, very, very likely going to be the hottest year on record since 1880, when we first began to keep track of that. It's going to be hotter than 2014, which was the hottest year than any other year prior to 2014. You know, and every single year has been hotter and hotter on the earth. And that's been happening since 1998. For 17 years now, every year has set a new record for heat. And think about last summer. The country was in a drought. 65 or 70% of the country was experiencing drought conditions, including the state of Washington. You know, and if you look at the storms, they're becoming worse. What you have is when you have heat going up, it pulls up more water into the atmosphere because you can hold more water, and that creates a problem. You know, that means that we saw more storms. We saw Hurricane Patricia, with winds reaching 200 miles an hour. Think about that. That superseded the year before's hurricane, which got winds up to 195 miles an hour. You know, we're seeing more storms. We're seeing more problems. You know, and 99% of scientists say that we're in global warming. And they're saying that it's man-caused. But you know, Super Freaks is a book that was written by Levitt and Dubner, and they point out it's a really thorny problem to know for sure. And it's uniquely so. It's a very difficult thing to know, because scientists can't run experiments. You know, they can't say, let's shut down all the cars for a period of 10 years and see the impact of what that means to have no cars on the road, see what happens. They can't do that. They can't move things around and change what's going on. Those are things that are happening, and it's part of the world. It's part of what we live in. And I talk about the greenhouse gas effect. I give the example when you're looking at a car. You're bringing your car in, you drive your car in, you're going to do some shopping. It's summertime. You park at the parking lot in the sun. You've had your air conditioner on. It's 80 degrees outside. It's 70 degrees in your car. Everything is comfortable in the car. You get out of your car, you go do your shopping, you come back an hour and a half later, and it's not 80 degrees in your car. It's 90 or 95 degrees. That's the impact of greenhouse gas. When we're moving all this carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, the sun is shining its rays into the earth, and some of that is being bounced back out into the atmosphere. But because we have this carbon dioxide blanket in the atmosphere, it bounces the rays back into the earth, and we're maintaining that heat. That's what greenhouse gases are. And if you remove all the religious and political fervor that surrounds this, it's something that we see. Politicians are there. They're talking about it doesn't exist. You have people feeling a political or a religious fervor that it does or does not exist. It's almost like having taxation without representation. Remember that from a long time ago? When people are not compelled to pay the entire cost or the full cost of their actions, they have very little incentive to change their behavior. Back at the end of the 1800s, in the 1890s, most big cities had a very big problem. The mode of transportation, the mode of moving materials around was the horse. And do you know what the horse leaves behind as it's walking along? Cities like New York City had piles of manure that were 40 and 60 feet high. You had people who were employed when it rained to sweep the streets and clear a place so you could walk from one side of the street to the other without getting a smelly substance on your shoes. People, in addition to that, you had a lot of diseases that came from that. You had dysentery, you had rats, you had all those issues that came about with these huge piles of manure. But it wasn't because of a social consciousness that those piles of manure disappeared. It wasn't because people wanted to do good for society that those manure piles disappeared. It was an economic reason they disappeared. It was easier, faster, and more efficient to switch to automobiles. And those piles of manure faded away. Right now, coal furnishes 41% of the world's electricity. It furnishes 29% of the world's energy. And carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is now 40% higher than it was at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. Out of Paris, the goal is to come away to say we want to limit the temperature increase from increasing more than 2 degrees centigrade. And 150 countries have pledged to meet that goal. Even the big oil companies, who were surprised at the number of participants, even they are getting on board with this whole thing. While the International Energy Commission says that fossil fuels, in order to reach that target, have to reach 60% of energy needs, still there's this focus on getting there. The risk is high. When you think about it, and what that can do as the atmosphere's heat, as the ice caps melt, as we see more droughts, as we see more storms, there's a really high risk. Whether we have, in reality, global warming or not, the question is, dealing with it is a positive thing. And there's a book that was published a couple years ago called That Used to Be Us by Friedman and Mandelbaum. And they identified 4 major issues that the U.S. faces. One of those issues is the trade-off between the requirements for energy and climate change. When you look at what's going on, the the concept, the forecast, is that energy needs are going to double by the year 2050. As the world grows, as the world economies grow, that means energy consumption will increase by 50%, will increase 100%. That's the need that's required in just 30 years, a little over 30, 35 years, something like that. Energy needs are going to increase dramatically. Even if they're high, it's still a significant increase. That means that much more load into the atmosphere if we continue to do it the way we're doing it. So it's an issue. How are we going to meet that issue? Because I don't believe that countries are going to slow down their growth as a socially conscious effort, no more than people, when they needed to get rid of the manure piles, slowed down the use of their horses. It wasn't the horses that went away. It was that cars came. To meet those needs, there are going to have to be some technological changes and some regulation changes. We're going to talk about that after we come back from the break, because we are coming up to a break. Don't go away. We got more to talk about. You also want to hear my guest. He's got a very interesting story and a very interesting offer. That's for you later in the program. Don't go away. I'll be right back after this commercial break.
About Money with Mike Adams will resume in a moment on Business Radio 1300 KKOL. For more information, click on adamsfinancialconcepts.com.
Lots of people manage investment portfolios. Just a few can manage a successful portfolio and provide exceedingly great service to their clients. Here's Mike Adams from Adams Financial Concepts.
We believe the price you pay should be based on the performance of your portfolio and the quality of service you receive.
You know, Mike, it seems that a lot of companies subscribe to the one-size-fits-all mentality of investing. Does one size really fit all?
Not with us. Every portfolio that we manage is customized to fit each particular client's objectives and risk tolerance. We place our clients' interests first in all portfolio decisions.
If you're looking for a home for your 7-figure plus investment portfolio, call Mike Adams of Adams Financial Concepts, specializing in creating and maintaining wealth for over 20 years. 206-903-1019. That's 206-903-1019. Or log on to adamsfinancialconcepts.com.
About Money continues. Remember the website adamsfinancialconcepts.com. Here's Mike.
So I've been talking about the climate summit that was going on in Paris earlier this week, and also about the impact, because the concerns over the climate are real, they're risky, and not dealing with it is significant risk. Even if it's a natural cause, we know that there's something going on and it's worth dealing with. And I don't believe that it's going to be a simple matter of governments meeting and passing regulations. I don't believe it's going to be one of those things which we will see happen in the same way we saw cars get rid of the manure piles in the big cities in the early 1900s. It's going to be an economic thing. And when you have an economic thing, you have opportunity for investment. The emerging countries are going to have to build additional power plants. They're going to need more energy. They're going to need electrical energy. They're going to need fuel. They're going to need all those things. And in the U.S., we're continuing to use our energy as well. While energy consumption has slowed down, electric utilities are only increasing by about 1% a year. We're still continuing to increase. And all of the things we're doing in terms of growth are going to probably require additional energy. Over the past, I've talked about the supercycle study done by Standard Chartered Bank showing that we're in a supercycle. We had a supercycle from 1870 to 1913. We had a supercycle from 1945 to 1970. They believe we're in a supercycle that began in 2009, and I believe that the data confirms that. And if that continues, that's going to consume more energy. But it also provides some opportunities. If you look at where we are energy-wise, worldwide the energy market today is over $7 trillion a year. $7 trillion. You know, if you look at the information industry, the radio, the TV, the papers, the magazines, the books, all that, the information industry, it's an industry that's just $1 billion. Energy is $7 billion. I believe it's a huge opportunity coming down the road. If you look at what happened in many industries, whether you look at steel or whether you look at some of the automobile companies, the big companies are being disrupted by new technology. I believe that's probably going to happen with energy. I don't know how, I don't know where, but I believe it's going to happen. Part of it's going to be clean energy and cleaning up some of the coal emissions. Some of it's going to be conservation. You know, if you look at the incandescent bulbs, 95 or 96% of the energy from an incandescent bulb is simply energy wasted. If you just replace one bulb per household it's the equivalent of taking 1 million cars off the road. Just one bulb per house. If you replace that with the more efficient LED lights, it's the equivalent of 1 million cars coming off the road. You know, while the U.S. has a huge number of coal-fired plants, China is building a couple a week. They can actually make those more efficient. They can make them better. And I believe that's going to happen. But beyond that, we're going to see transmission lines change. We're going to see a smart grid. We're going to see metering. We're going to see future sources of energy come into play. Electrical, gas. You know, there's bioengineering that's taking place. And yes, a lot of it is very expensive, but we've seen that happen. We're going to see solar. We're going to see wind. We're going to see a lot of things. There was an article in The Economist, which was very interesting this week, talking about energy. It talked about dark matter and dark energy. Talked about the theory that there's WIMPs, weakly interacting massive particles. It's a theory. You have these particles which are affected by gravity, but they don't interact with anything else we know of it. They don't interact with light. They don't interact with the matter we know. They don't interact with energy we know. And yet, the theory is that energy and matter that we know right now, when you look at a desk, when you look at the sunlight, when you look at all those things, that compromises 4% of the universe. 75% is dark energy, and another 20% is dark matter. That's the theory. What happened this week is the skeptics about that theory could not prove any alternative to that theory. They gave up. They threw in the towel. You know, Sherlock Holmes said, and I told this story about Sherlock Holmes a week ago or 2 weeks ago, whatever it was. Sherlock Holmes said, and I quote, "When you have eliminated the impossible, what remains, no matter how improbable, must be the truth." Let me say that again. When you've eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, no matter how improbable, must be the truth. You know, that was a quote out of The Economist as well. But that's the concept. If they haven't been able to disprove this whole theory of the WIMPs, gravitational attraction, but no other action with anything, any other particles, any other matter, any other energy, it may very well exist. And if it does, it could furnish the equivalent to the car versus the horse. It's all potential. It's all theory. You know, 1964, Higgs proposed the boson particle, the God particle in physics. 1964. It wasn't until July 4th of 2012 that particle was identified. It's a long time, but there is the theory there. No one's been able to disprove this theory. No one's been able to find alternatives. You know, will it happen in my lifetime? I don't know. Will it happen any other time? I don't know. I can remember in 1965 looking at Time magazine, and they had a picture of the double helix. And they had an article about Crick and Watson identifying the double helix, you know. And I was dumb and stupid at that time. And I said, so what? You know? Well, the so what is we now have a biotech industry which furnishes over $1 billion in revenues. It's huge and significant and medically making tremendous strides. And bioengineering, we're just beginning to see the very beginning of that. Dark energy? I don't know. But we have an issue that we will face. And around that issue, I believe there'll be investment opportunities. Something to be aware of, something to watch, something which could be very big for investors. I want to wrap that up and come around. I have a great guest today, Craig Dawson, who is the CEO of his company. Craig, welcome to the program.
Mike, thanks for having me today.
And the name of the company is
Retail Lockbox Inc.
Okay. Sounds interesting as a name. But let's start with your background, first of all.
Sure. Well, I'm Mike. I'm from Seattle, born and raised. Went to Bush School, graduated there, attended the University of Washington, played tennis at the University of Washington, and also graduated from the business school, degree in finance and marketing. Went on to get a job and start working at Burroughs Corporation. Burroughs acquired Sperry Univac in 1986, 87, and became Unisys Corporation. My job there was to sell mainframe computers, big disk drives, terminals, those kinds of things. Had a major accounts territory, sold a lot of major accounts in the area. One of the niche markets I sold was check processing, remittance processing. So high volume customers, Seattle Times, Costco, Airborne Express, those kinds of customers. And about 10 years later, founded Retail Lockbox, payment processing, check payment processing company, document scanning and imaging, credit card processing, online payments.
So let's talk about check processing. You know, I sit down, I write a check, put it in an envelope, send it off, and something happens to that check. I'm sure that it's more complicated than what I imagine.
Sure. So most customers, most businesses, a lot of businesses process their own payments as they come in. What we do is we offer that service for municipalities, large companies, anyone that has a large number of incoming receivables. So we go to the post office in the morning. That post office might be in Seattle, it might be in Portland, it might be in Boise, it might be in Anchorage. We bring that mail back to our facility here in Seattle. We have machines that open mail at 10,000 pieces an hour on the high end, and if an operator is sitting at a machine, they open at about 1,000 pieces an hour. We call that low speed. We take the check and the stub. We take a digital picture of both those items. We read the little numbers in the bottom of your stub. It's usually your account number and how much you owe, maybe an invoice number. We read the check electronically. We read the number that you handwrite on the legal line, and we read the number the numerical number in the courtesy amount box, and we match that to the coupon that gets sent in, the stub that gets sent in. We provide our customers a balanced file at the end of the day, telling them who paid how much. We send them that electronic file uploads to their accounts receivable system, depending on what that is, Oracle or Lawson, whatever kind of accounts receivable system that is. And then we also deposit the money, in most cases today, electronically via an image cash letter into their bank. And then they can also see images of those transactions on a daily basis, so they can see the actual image of the check and the stub or correspondence or envelope that was sent in with that payment.
So I want to talk first about the 10,000. Mm-hmm. So you receive all these envelopes. They're not sorted. How do you just throw them into a box? And they...
Well, they actually are sorted. So a primary sort is done by the post office. All of our customers have their own P.O. box, so it comes in by P.O. box. And then what we do is we actually do go ahead and sort that work, because there's some envelopes that can't go through our automated equipment.
Okay, hold that thought. We're going to come right back after this commercial break. Don't go away. We've got more to talk here. And so we'll be right back.
More About Money coming up with Mike Adams on Business Radio 1300 KKOL. For more information, click on adamsfinancialconcepts.com.
Creating and maintaining wealth has been the specialty of Adams Financial Concepts for over 20 years. Every portfolio managed by Adams Financial Concepts is customized to fit each particular client's objectives and risk tolerance. The client's interest always comes first in portfolio decisions. Call Mike Adams today at 206-903-1019 or log on to adamsfinancialconcepts.com to check out their AFC performance. They welcome your review. That's adamsfinancialconcepts.com.
Apply.
We're back with more About Money. For details on what you hear on today's show, visit adamsfinancialconcepts.com. Now, here again is Mike Adams.
So I'm here with Craig Dawson of Retail Lockbox. We started talking about the processing of checks. We started talking about the machine that does 10,000 checks an hour. But you have a fast machine and a slow machine.
Right.
Why the slow machine?
Well, the slow machine is really for exception processing. So if you have a single check, single stub that come in an envelope, it's easy to open that at high speed. But a lot of times people send more than one check, multiple payments, or they might only send a check and they don't send the coupon back. There might be correspondence in there. It might just be a credit card payment. So we have to open the other items in a different way. So in a lower speed environment, 1,000 hours is still a lot.
1,000 is a lot. I was trying to do the math in my head. 1,000 divided by 60 to get to the number per minute, which is what, 40, 50?
Yeah, about
150 a minute, 160 a minute. And that means 20-some per second, 25, 30, 27 per second.
It's pretty amazing.
I mean, that's amazing. So obviously this is not something that someone is actually sitting there looking at. It's mechanical.
Right. So we could get payments in from the post office, run it through our automated opening system, run it through our automated processing system where we take the digital picture of the check and stub, read the information electronically, and no human would ever touch that except for to put the envelope actually into the machine and process that payment.
So what happens in the exception where, I write a check, I don't enclose the stub,
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of ways to handle that. So the first way is just to send that item back to our customer, deposit the funds in their bank, and then send it back to the customer and let them figure out who made that payment. We've created a tool, though, because that's really one of the biggest pain points for our customer. 80% of the time is going to be spent on exception processing. So we created an online tool, a web-based tool, a cloud-based tool that allows the customer to come in, see that transaction, add the appropriate data to that transaction, whether it's the account number or invoice number, whatever they need to post that transaction. And then at a time specific during the day, we're going to sweep that work back and put it into the electronic data file in the correct format for their customer to post.
And it all gets posted almost immediately.
It's all the same day. So if we get mail anytime today, that's going to get posted for our customers today, for our clients.
I remember way back in the early 90s, I signed on to CheckFree, maybe their first or second year in operation.
Right.
And sometimes the checks would go to the vendor paying a bill, and it might be 1 or 2 or 3 days before it actually got posted.
Yeah.
Today, that doesn't happen.
Well, even still in the check-free environment, basically today what you're talking about is online banking, e-pay for folks that go to their banks to pay. Those items, a lot of times they're still creating a paper-based check, and 3 days is good. If you got it done in 3 days, there still could take 5, 6, 7, 10 days, just depending, because a lot of those companies do aggregate those bills and they'll send them out. Instead of sending them out one or two at a time, they'll send out 15 or 20 at a time to save in postage.
But I mean, when the vendor, whoever I bought something from,
Right.
would post. It would take them time to sort through.
Correct.
You do all that,
Yes, we do. That's
and
what we
it
do.
posts automatically.
Right.
It was a long time, I'd forgotten about all that.
Well, it's a part of the process that most people don't think about. They think, hey, I'm going to send the check. I'm going to send this hopefully coupon, and I'm going to send it to the vendor that they're working with, and they're going to process that.
So you do more than just check processing, however.
Correct.
If you look at the number of checks, it seems like it's the number of checks that are being written has been dropping for a while.
Sure. So, back in 1980, automated clearinghouse came around, and that was the demise of checks. So everyone was gonna automatically have their payments taken out of their account, and checks were going to be gone. From that time, the 1980s, check volume actually exploded. You had a lot of different subscription services like your pager, your cell phone, your cable bill, your Netflix bill, whatever. And so check volume actually exploded over that time, over the next 15 years. Since that period of time, check volume has been declining because there's multiple methods to payment today. Obviously, ACH that we just talked about, the automated clearinghouse, but then came things like interactive voice response, meaning people could come in and pay on the telephone. Today, you have a couple of ways to pay electronically. If you have an invoice in your hand and you want to pay that right now, there's pay now buttons that you can go to your vendor's website, or now they can actually send you, and this is both those processes, all three of those processes we do, but you can also get the bill electronically in your email, click the button, pay that bill, you have a user ID and password, see your bills online. That's a big part of our business, and it's moved from not just check processing, but we also do credit card merchant services processing for clients as well.
And a lot of banks now are allowing mobile check deposits. I mean, that's the way that I deposit. You don't have to walk to the bank. You just sit there at your desk and click.
Absolutely. Obviously, mobile is a big way now for people to buy things, make payments. And there'll be big strides over the next 5 to 10 years in mobile for folks.
Yeah.
Make it a lot easier.
Anyway, I started to say you do things beyond just check processing. Tell us a little bit about that.
Right. So I hit on a little bit. I mean, we do online payment processing as well. So there's two ways to do that for our customers. They can have what we call a non-login environment. Basically, I've got a bill in my hand, and we create a web portal for our customers that's branded to that customer. So it looks like you're on their website when you click the button on their website, or you can come to our, paystation.com and as that sort of the aggregation point for all of our customers. But basically, most people come on to a vendor's website, they click the button, and again, they have that bill in their hand. They want to pay that bill within about 2 minutes. So they'll put in the pertinent information on the first page, account number, amount they owe. On the second page, they'll put in the payment information, which is whether it's credit card or electronic check. On the third page, they'll have a chance for them to validate that information, and if there's a convenience fee, they pay that there, and they're notified. And then on the last page, they basically get a confirmation that the payment was made, and an email comes out to them. The next step there really is full-blown online payment processing, electronic bill payment and presentment. So a customer now signs up for the service with that vendor. They're going to get their invoice or their payment information via email. They're going to be able to click on it, put their user ID and password, something they got to sign up for now, and then again they can come in, pay that bill right now. They can make a future payment on that bill, so it's the first of the month, but I don't want to pay it to the 15th. They can set up recurring payments. They can set up multiple ways to pay. So I want to pay this month with my credit card. Next month I want to pay with my checking account. The month after that I want to pay with my savings account. So they have multiple payment profiles there. And obviously you can see a history of bills going forward.
Awesome. So you also process credit cards.
Correct.
So tell us about that.
So credit cards is something, is a business that we started about 10 years ago. We were about 10 years into our check processing business and just really realized that virtually every one of our customers accepts credit cards in some way, either at the point of sale. They either want to take it on their bill so someone can write in the credit card information, and then obviously the future at that point was paying online. So we really wanted to get in front of that because we knew that if check volume was going to go away, we would lose those transactions to other vendors if we weren't doing that work. So we set up a second company, a sister company called Retail Lockbox Merchant Services, really to spearhead that effort for us. And so now we can, for any of our customers, allow payments to be made at the point of sale, on the coupon, or online. And our goal is for all of our customers, as we help them move from a paper-based environment to an electronic payment environment, we want to be the ones that help them no matter what way they get the accounts receivables coming into their business.
And so for the listeners of this program, do you have a special thing that you would offer?
Certainly. So today, for all the listeners, Retail Lockbox will provide a free analysis of your credit card merchant services. We'll look at your current information, and then we'll give you a review. And the goal is to save you money on your payment process. So we'll give a free review of your merchant services, your credit card processing.
And how do they get that? What's the process they need to go through?
They can email us at info@retaillockbox.com, or they can come to our website, retaillockboxmerchantservices.com, and there's an automated way for one of your listeners to put in information and get that free quote.
Well, great. I hope you get a ton of responses. Thanks for being on the program. Very interesting company. Very interesting time.
Mike, thanks for having me today.
So I want to shift. We've got just a couple minutes before the commercial break. New book out by Philip Tetlock, called Super Forecasting. And it applies to what we do in the investment business, because we're in the business for forecasting. We're trying to forecast how you increase your wealth. You know, one of the things that's pointed out is when somebody says there's a 70% chance of rain, that means there's a 30% chance that it's not going to rain. So when there's somebody forecasts a 70% chance of rain and it doesn't rain, a lot of people say they got it wrong. That's not necessarily true. They thought that the chances of rain were greater, but there's a chance that it was not going to happen. If they actually made their forecast 70% rain, 30% sunshine, and it showed sun, you'd be happy. But we got more for this coming after this break. Don't go away. I want to apply this whole thing to my conversation with Dr. Goodfriend. I'll be right back.
Stay tuned. About Money returns in a moment with Mike Adams here on Business Radio 1300 KKOL. For more information, click on adamsfinancialconcepts.com.
Lots of people manage investment portfolios. Just a few can manage a successful portfolio and provide exceedingly great service to their clients. Here's Mike Adams from Adams Financial Concepts.
We believe the price you pay should be based on the performance of your portfolio and the quality of service you receive.
You know, Mike, it seems that a lot of companies subscribe to the one-size-fits-all mentality of investing. Does one size really fit all?
Not with us. Every portfolio that we manage is customized to fit each particular client's objectives and risk tolerance. We place our client's interests first in all portfolio decisions.
If you're looking for a home for your 7-figure plus investment portfolio, call Mike Adams of Adams Financial Concepts, specializing in creating and maintaining wealth for over 20 years. 206-903-1019. That's 206-903-1019. Or log on to adamsfinancialconcepts.com.
Now we return to About Money. There's more information waiting for you at adamsfinancialconcepts.com. Here again is your host, Mike Adams.
So I started talking about the book by Tetlock, Super Forecasting. Not talking so much about the book as the concept that when somebody says there's a 70% chance of rain, that means there's a 30% chance that something's not going to happen. So when I start talking about the super cycle, and my feeling is that we're going to be in a super cycle, that's not 100% for sure. It's not a right or wrong kind of thing. I think it's more significant than the alternative. When I talk about Dow reaching 100,000, it's not 100% for sure. It's probably more more certain than the super cycle, but it's not 100%. Investing is a lot like poker. If you look at chess and you compare a novice to an expert, the experts always win at chess. If you look at slot machines, whether you're an expert or whether you're a novice, it doesn't make any difference. But investing is like poker, where the odds are sometimes it just happens that a novice gets a better hand than an expert. Over the long run, the experts probably win. But on the short term, novices can kind of win. But the probabilities change. If you played poker and played 5-card stud, for example, you know that everyone's dealt one card face down and then everyone's dealt a card face up, and you make your bets because you can look and see what everyone else has. On the up card, you can't tell what they've got on the down card, but you make your bets, and then they deal another up card and you bet again. And the probabilities change. If you've got an ace down and an ace up, that's a pretty good hand. But if you can see after 2 cards are dealt up, you can see 2 other aces, you're not going to get a third ace. There's only 4 in the deck, you're not going to get another ace. Someone can beat that hand with 3 2s. So the probabilities change. It's the same in this whole thing. I talked earlier in the program about this concept of the WIMPs, the weakly interactive massive particles. It's a probability that those things exist, but it's a very high probability, and they either do or do not exist. It's not a question of maybe or what. It's they do or do not exist. The Higgs boson particle exists. It's part of physics, and a lot of theories are built around knowing that. A lot of the system is built. It's not like economics. It's good to consider a full range of probabilities, and I say all that leading up to my conversation with Dr. Goodfriend. He's a really brilliant guy. He was Senior Vice President of the Federal Reserve. He's a great professor. He mostly wins being one of the top professors at Carnegie Mellon. Students like him. He's a macroeconomist, which means they look at the economy from 100 miles or 1,000 miles up. They look at aggregations of data and using that data to predict behavior or to look at behavior, what's happening. He's very smart. He was one that wrote a paper 10 or 12 or 15 years ago. I don't remember. He mentioned it to me. I should remember, but I don't. Wrote a paper that said it was possible to break zero interest. It was possible for bonds to pay negative interest rates. At the time he wrote the paper, he got 0 citations. Nobody thought that was possible. If you want to buy Swiss bonds today, you get a minus 0.5%. If you want to buy Italian bonds, you get a minus 0.5%. If you want to buy Swedish bonds, minus 0.5%. Or maybe it's a little less, maybe a little more, but they have a point that you have to pay them interest. They don't pay you interest. They broke the 0. Now instead of getting 0 citations, he's gotten 500 citations. He was way ahead of the game. He was way ahead of his time. And he's been like that. He's a brilliant guy. He has a real forecast. It was a most interesting conversation. And right now he's doing some macroeconomics. And here's the point where we disagree. Because the macroeconomic model he's building, and it is a model, it's a mathematical model, Carnegie Mellon, when I went through the school, it's a very mathematical approach to business. You do linear regressions, canonical correlations, you do all those things. It gives you a real mathematical approach to the world. And I say really to the world. Social studies, whatever it was, mathematical approach. And he's building a mathematical model or working together with other people to build a mathematical model to describe from 100 miles up what the economy is going to be doing. And the prediction is that the economy and growth is going to slow down. It's the exact opposite of the conclusions of the Standard Charter. Standard Charter studies showed that we were going to be entering into, for an extended period of time, this super cycle where world GDP grew faster than average. And while that happened from 2009 for a few years, it slowed down, and it is slowed down considerably. Since that time, I believe it's going to take off again. You know, looking at historical data and trying to extract and forecast off historical data what will happen in the future, I think, is an issue. You know, Thomas Malthus, 1776 to 1834, was an English scholar, talked about economics and the population, and he said, you know, things were going to slow down. It was going to be better to have wars, to have people marry or put off marriage, because there was not going to be enough food to feed all the people. He never saw the agricultural revolution. You know, if you look at where we are today, we are producing 600 times what we produced in 1850 in terms of agriculture, and we have 1% of the population, or 1% of what used to produce, 1/600th. You have Gilbreth, that wrote the book The Affluent Society in 1958 and The New Industrial State in 1967, and he said American standard of living was risen as high as it was going to. 1,100 square foot home, that was the max. 1 car per family, that's as good as it gets. Large companies were going to dominate, and the problem for Galbraith was that large companies were going to dominate, and it was impossible to go, or improbable to go much beyond that. Large organizations controlled the labor, they maximized profits. Never foresaw little companies like the one that grew up in Redmond called Microsoft would disrupt a lot of what was going on. So it's possible that we're going to have, and Dr. Goodfriend's model is going to be actual and result in what's going on, and we could see an economy slowing down. I believe the probability is greater that we're going to see an exponential growth, not a declining growth. We'll have to see. You know, 70% chance rain, 30% sun. I don't know where to put the probabilities, but I believe there's a reason to think that disruptive technology will come along, and looking at historical data, it's difficult to forecast that in a model. Who would have ever seen in the 1890s that those piles of manure would simply disappear, that they would no longer be a problem? When you look at the streets of Seattle today, we don't see piles 60 feet high of manure. We see a lot of cars, and we see a lot of problems with cars, but the manure's disappeared. You're looking at historical data in 1890, would you have ever forecast that in the year 2015 we wouldn't be dealing with manure problems? That's it for today. Have a very good week, and I will be back next Friday to talk about money. And you can find us on our website, follow us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter. Next week, we'll be back.
You've been listening to About Money with Mike Adams, a registered investment advisor. If you'd like more information about what you heard today, or about Mike's investment philosophy and strategy, or if you want Mike to evaluate your own portfolio, click on AdamsFinancialConcepts.com. That's AdamsFinancialConcepts.com. The information shared on the preceding program was for educational purposes only, and any investment advice given may not be suitable for all investors. Join us again next Friday afternoon at 3 for more About Money with Mike Adams, here on Business Radio 1300 KKOL.
The preceding program was sponsored by Adams Financial Concepts. Creating and maintaining wealth has been the specialty of Adams Financial Concepts for over 20 years. Every portfolio managed by Adams Financial Concepts is customized to fit each particular client's objectives and risk tolerance. The client's interest always comes first in portfolio decisions. Call Mike Adams today at 206-903-1019 or log on to adamsfinancialconcepts.com to check out their AFC performance.